All right, hello everyone. Welcome to MaxEB breakout room number 6. This is possibly our most ambitious breakout room. I don't know. There's just a lot to discuss. Okay, so first thing on the agenda, it seems hopefully we have a good number of staking providers in here. And we're kind of soliciting input on their general opinions on consolidations and custom ceilings. It was surprising, at least for custom ceilings. I don't know. I got the vibe from the wider solo staker community that they kind of wanted it, but and then as far as consolidations go, I think we're just for this initial part, let's just get like a general opinion. Like, would you favor CL triggered or EL triggered consolidations? So yeah, I don't know. I don't think there's any polls that you can do with this. But yeah, so the staking providers on the call, if you want to just say who you are and which one you would prefer, CL or EL, if there were a choice, and then we'll continue to discuss that. But it's good to get kind of a poll of preferences. Hmm.
Wants to go, I can go. For Black Team inside, yeah, consolidation definitely needed, and a slight preference on execution layer triggered, but not like main thing is that we do need it.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
and I outlined some of the reasoning in my written response there, but yeah, that's
Okay. And then it looks like Lido would prefer EL triggered strongly uh and custom ceilings to happen weekly. Okay.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. EL initiate consolidation are like better
Okay.
for us. Custom ceilings are nice to have in.
And then I saw a Discord message from Rocket Pool a while back. Where it kind of didn't matter, but I believe last call they kind of said they would like EL triggered if like slight preference for it, I guess. But it doesn't matter to them. They won't need to change it. And it all depends on their next, like, they haven't launched their next version yet. So they're pretty agnostic with a slight preference, I suppose. And then um, is anyone from Eigenlayer here?
Hey, that's me. I'm Yash from MaxEB. Yeah, on our side, we'd also prefer execution layer consolidation regarding custom ceilings to happen. That's nice to have. Yeah, execution layer.
Okay. Okay. And then I believe also, I just want to get clear because from Lido, I think last time you said that like you'd have to upgrade your contracts and it might just slow your overall consolidation of existing validators for having to do that. And because you said you needed 2 upgrades essentially, but it would slow you down in consolidating your initial validators if we were
Yeah,
at
yeah.
CL.
If there are only beacon chain initiated consolidation, then and it's not gated by execution layer, then we would probably like very likely to have to go with 2 upgrades. One to like to duct tape everything so it doesn't break when the upgrade goes in, and the other with a real upgrade.
Okay.
If it's gated by execution layer, we'll have to do with like we will be able to do with 1 upgrade, and
Okay.
that would be faster.
Okay. Is there any other providers on the call? staking providers, I mean.
Hi, it's Ben from Figment. To be frank, I need to take this away. This is the first breakout call I'm on. I
Sure.
suspect that the preference on our side would also be for EL.
Okay. I see someone else is unmuted, but I don't hear
Hey,
anything.
this is Demeter from Liquid Collective. I just want to say that I don't have an official consensus from the whole team yet, but we're leaning towards EL. I think in general, having ability to consolidate on the execution layer just gives us more control, we feel, and it's going to be a smoother transition.
Okay. And is there anyone else? Okay. And then,
Sorry, I was speaking
oh,
with the mic off. So I don't think they are on the call, though I asked them to come, but though I've spoken to P2P folks, and they said that in general, the best option for them is consolidation that are gated by both sides, execution layer and consensus layer. So like it's not a surprise for anyone when consolidation happened. But that was like a very short conversation. We had like 30 minutes call about many things, and this was one of them. So I'm not sure that is like the final opinion from P2P side.
sure. Okay. Um, and then I guess, oh, we have two more people to admit. And then I guess in terms of custom ceilings, I get the vibe that, well, I get the vibe, I haven't heard any staking pools say that they really wanted the feature, but I haven't heard any be against the feature either. Maybe just like weakly in favor seems to be. Does anyone have an opinion on custom ceilings that's not basically weakly in favor?
I have like a hypothesis that it's like very dependent with how party withdrawals will work actually. If it's this like will work with 7002 together, then it's like mostly, and 7002 is used to for example, to bypass the exit queue, like I think Obol folks proposed, then most people will be priced out of partial withdrawals uh, using the like regular mechanism. So they might want to reconsider the stance on wanting them like weekly or
Um,
strongly.
Sorry, what do you mean by bypassing the execute?
yeah. So
There was a proposal from I think um, uh, Obol side, Obol folks that exits via 7002 are supposed to go straight to the head of the exit queue. So basically, you're paying for your exits to come faster.
Okay, but that's not in the spec right now, or like it's not being
Yeah,
considered for the spec right now.
Yeah, I get it. It's not in the spec right now. What I'm saying is like future changes, like or like how the exactly party withdrawals will be implemented might uh, affect how much people want custom ceilings. I think for us it's weekly either way, but for other folks it's not. I'm not so sure.
I think generally as a theory, bypassing queues is going to be very hard to get through anyone. So that would be interesting if they managed to get that through.
Well, it sounds like he's not necessarily saying bypassing the queue, but making it almost priority fee, like highest auction goes to the front.
It'd want to be a very big fee.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's an opportunity for people to compete and burn more ETH, but everything still goes through a queue. That's what it sounds like. But yeah, that's an interesting idea. I'm not sure. Yeah. Okay, but so then it sounds like people are weakly in favor of custom ceilings, but no one's like needing custom ceilings or anything like that.
Kind of like the idea by MaxEB tested to put it as a sort of not a fixed ETH amount, but a percentage of accumulating versus payout, basically. Not sure if that is obviously raising technical complexity or whatever, but I think for a feature like that, there could be an alternative solution if there's no strong consensus to include it now.
Sorry, I'm not sure I'm familiar with what that is. What were you saying?
It was in the GitHub. The testing CTO put his proposal in there. It's quite a long one, but just saying that there might be alternatives rather than just fixing one ETH value, but sort of achieving the goal in a different way.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
There might be something that might be a reason for, if there's no strong favor, it sounds like, from the technical side, it would rather be excluded to avoid the complexity. Then it could be, be potentially done as a follow-up EIP or something if there's dependencies on the execution withdrawals, execution triggered withdrawals 7002 or any other ideas in terms of that, then we then consider it a separate one.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay. Yeah, I suppose I'd have to look at that, but also I'm not sure that the opinion, I mean, anyone could correct me if I'm wrong, but as far as custom ceilings, I think as far as how we trigger consolidations, that decision sort of needs to be made today because we're pushing towards testnets very soon. But potentially, if we have custom ceilings, that may be something we could throw in later on in development if we decide we really wanted to, as testnets stabilize. But I don't know. That's just my read. If other people feel differently, go ahead and say something.
I just think there's a fair level of risk already in this ERP. So adding things like custom ceilings, if there's not a really strong requirement for them, to me seems like something we don't really need to do.
Sure. Okay. So then, oh, Mikhail, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to share a bit of my thoughts on EL triggered consolidation. If we decide to have them, can you hear me well, or am I?
Yep, I can hear you.
Yeah. Okay, great. So if we decide to go with EL triggered consolidation, I would say that potentially we are at risk of creating a technical debt for technical debt that will have to support, that the protocol will have to support, potentially for, like, how to say that better, like, we have not yet seen the strong case for having consolidation. I personally yet not convinced that this is going to be something that will be needed by staking providers and by stakers long term. So the consolidation operation, I mean, that will constantly be happening in the protocol, and we'll see a use case where after consolidating at this up to a certain level, the consolidation will be needed for some other use cases. I don't know. So as for me, this is kind of like not yet well understood, and implementing a smart contract and having all these kind of things might be an overkill for this case. For instance, if we compare to EL triggered exits, we see a clear use case, a clear case for this functionality, and we want to enshrine it into EL with like much more understanding than with consolidations. So that's why I'm really hesitant to commit to something like that.
So, yeah, so I think there's a question of why it's more technical debt, and I think you mean adding it to the block is more technical debt in a sense, adding it to the EL, the field.
Yeah, maybe.
So I don't know if you've seen Light Client's proposal, but he proposes that these, like all of these sort of message bus type messages to the CLB have a byte for it, like an enum for which one they are. In which case, even if this gets deprecated, you only lose a bit for that like message bus space. You don't actually have this deprecated field within the block. So basically, like the idea is, I mean, I can summarize my proposal for us considering EL initiated consolidations. Basically, at the end of the day, the queue, like the way that exits will work is you just have this contract that's a queue, or implements a queue. And then at the end of every block, the execution layer calls that contract via a system account, and like that contract will dequeue things and return them. And then the EL will stuff them at the end of the block. Now, with Light Client's proposal, like everything gets stuffed into the same array, just with a byte at the beginning, specifying what kind of object it is. So, and I argue in this article that this is almost the exact same smart contract. You only change constants for the size of the object that you're queuing. If you're doing an exit, or you're doing consolidation, or you're doing something else. And also Light Clients has indicated his plan is to generalize the 7002 contract regardless of whether we use consolidations with that contract or not. So yeah, but in terms of technical debt, I mean, deprecating this in the future would involve simply not calling that contract, and then any transaction you send to that contract is just useless. But yeah, all you'd really have to do is not call that contract. And if we do this thing where we unify all those messages, but with an enum to determine which one, or with like a byte in front to determine which type of message, then we'd only lose one bit in that enum, and we wouldn't have this like field sitting around in the block that's got to be null forever.
It might be that I'm overthinking it. I need to take a closer look to the Light Client's recent proposal on this, and yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's just my understanding. Is he's proposing that when we actually add these objects to the block, whether they be exits, partial withdrawals, or just things that we might want to pass to the consensus layer from the execution layer later in future forks. That basically any of those messages in the abstract be passed all in the same field in the block as an array, but that they come with a byte in front to say what kind of message, so that they don't all get passed as separate fields, which could then later be deprecated, and then you'd have this empty field floating around the block forever. So I believe that's his proposal in a nutshell. Yeah, I mean, I guess we sort of skipped ahead into that article, but anyway, we could move on to the next thing, which is I have a discussion on target exits per block. Not exactly sure what there was around that, actually. Just remember that from last meeting. Anyone want to refresh?
I think we were supposed to revisit that number, but I don't have any information or documents about what it should be changed to. But I do remember, like, if people were using the partial withdrawal queue, that we would revisit this target if there was going to be a lot of usage there.
I didn't work on that exactly, but I can provide some color from our perspective here. We currently we use the natural ceiling of like 0x01 validators to manage the stake distribution between node operators. So like if there is a big node operator and a small node operator in LiDAR set, and we want to make them even, all the extra ETH that's getting skimmed is going to, like, first is going to withdrawals if there are any withdrawals, but if there isn't, they are going to the smaller node operator, not the largest, and the stake is getting more distributed more evenly. In 0x02 world, the smaller and the larger operators just grow indefinitely, and we basically have two options for managing this stake distribution. One is using exits, and the other is using partial withdrawals. If we're using partial withdrawals, just if we're doing this like once per half a year per validator or something, it comes down to about 400 operations per day, and this is like combined with like all the exits people want to do and other partial withdrawals other people might want to do as well. I'm not sure how much support there will be. I think it depends greatly on how expensive and how easy it is to do. It means that, and if the partial withdrawals share the target number with exits, it means that it's going to be that this queue is going to be more crowded than people think. Like my preferred option here would be to separate these queues if that's possible, to have separate one for partial withdrawals and one separate one for exits, or ditch the fee mechanism entirely or almost entirely from this. I think with latest proposal for message about light clients, it's possible to like ditch the fee entirely.
Yeah, I believe there's almost certainly we would choose separate limits for each type of operation. We would try to tune that, unless someone has some reason why we wouldn't do that. But I would imagine it's very likely we would have separate limits for each type of operation. Yeah, so I suppose we don't necessarily need to make a decision right now on exactly what the limits would be, because that is easily changeable. Like with we could do further analysis and easily change that down the road with a one-line change, and that's not something to like slow down our implementation of testnets right now. But it sounds like, yeah, we have some more, I guess, in-depth analysis to do on exactly what these limits would be based on what demand we expect. Some people unmuted.
Yeah.
I don't know if they're waiting to talk.
Yeah. So I just want to say that this number was chosen. This target exits per payload was chosen before there was a decision to use to use 7,002 for partial withdrawals. So it was set to 2. And I think that if we're not considering like generalizing 7,002, which might be the case, and it's going to be a different story, then this parameter like target exits per payload or target withdrawal request per payload should be set to 8, equally to the max partial withdrawal per payload that we currently have in the spec. So I think it's reasonable. But we should understand whether we generalize in 7,002 before making any decision on this. If we have it generalized, probably should be 8 as well, because yeah, it depends on the max number of
I think
operations
those
that
are
we want to.
independent, actually. When you think about it, like, yes, the size of the array, like in theory, is as large as the max of every different parameter because they're all getting put into one array. But like, we're basically not limiting that array. We're limiting the operation of each type in that array. So we have a custom limit, like a specific limit for each one.
Yeah, that's true, but yeah.
So
But
there's one other complication in 7002, which is about sort of a base fee kind of a mechanism with regard to limits and target, and that how that would sort of work in multi operational queue is basically, I mean, there is some sort of mystery over there because, I mean, if, for example, you have a lot of one particular kind of operations in a block, how would it raise so the fee that would be paid for the operations, or it would not, and how
It
that
wouldn't,
is
at least
implemented?
in this like initial, like the idea behind this is that each operation is its own contract, instance of the same contract, and the contract itself manages the base fee. That's my understanding. So high usage of one operation doesn't raise the base fee implemented by a different contract for another operation.
Yeah, I mean,
It's
but if it's the same message queue, then I'm not sure how would
it's
that
not
be
the same
in a
queue.
separate.
There's different, it's like each contract implements a queue. Each contract implements a base fee and a queue. So, you know, if you fill up one queue that's in a contract, then you're going to see the base fee increase as a lot of operations are submitted there. But another contract manages the other base fee and queue, and it's just how much ETH you have to send to that contract in order to get your operation in the queue.
So probably basically what we are saying is that all different operations will actually have different contracts and will have their own queues, but when they will be popped into some sort of a field for CL, that field might just be the single one, which will carry the kind of
Yeah,
operation
that
and then follow
that
yeah.
right. Yeah, so that field will just like it'll be sent to the consensus block or like I guess append it all together, but then but we will apply limits to how many of each operation can go in each block. This is my understanding of basically the direction we're headed. And so you can't
So basically the EL queue can take more operations which it can queue at its own end, but yes, there will be some sort of a max that will be passed to CL and will be popped from that queue for each kind of operation.
Yeah, that's my understanding. Although I guess one thing is that the contract itself implements the queue, or like the contract implements
Yeah, so
how many get
no, no.
dequeued for each. So like the only issue is
Right.
that when we launch the contracts, we sort of, unless we can make it a parameter, we could make it a parameter of the system contract that calls the queue. That would be the best way, because then we could tune it later. It wouldn't be like something we choose at the launch of the contract time.
So it would be something like max blobs per block kind of a thing, which is
Yes.
enforced at
Yeah.
specs.
My point is just that it needs to be part of the spec and not part of the contract. Like it needs to be a parameter that, like, because for like the system account will call the contract at the end of every block, and I'm just advocating that the parameter for the maximum number be part of that call, so that it can be tuned later or changed later if necessary, and not encoded in the contract itself, because then we don't have to like change the bytecode of the contract.
Or each time, or it could be even simpler that each time you call the contract pop function, it's like it gives you one item, and depending on how many times the client actually wants to call it, it can give you as many kind of operations. So basically, that doesn't even need to be
Yeah,
part of
you
the
could do
contract.
that as well. Yeah. I mean, I believe right now the idea is that it's embedded in the contract, but it could be changed so that it's part of the parameter passed to the contract. That'd be easier for future changes.
Got it. That also is sort of a workable solution.
But either way, I think the consensus is like separate limits and
So if there is a separate contract and separate queues anyway, I mean separate limits definitely automatically make sense. We don't even need to consider a combined limit.
yeah, it looks like we got light clients on the call now, actually. We were just discussing the contract and potentially having, just to catch you up to speed, light clients, hopefully you have a mic.
Hello.
Oh, good. So we were just actually discussing the contract and how we could potentially have multiple operations, and that we would want to have probably a separate maximum for each type of operation, and that potentially that maximum might change in future hard forks. And so either the contract could just return a single item from the queue when called, and then you could choose how many times you call it, or you could hopefully pass, or you could pass the maximum to the contract. But that just would enable us to leave the maximum as a parameter that we could tune in future hard forks.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Okay. Yeah, so basically that's the idea, is separate maximums, separate targets, and then potentially, if like client CIP is adopted, that they all get put in the same array but with a byte in front to indicate which kind of operation they are, is my understanding. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, that's right. I think on the CL side, like how it actually gets represented in the execution payload, it's kind of up to you guys how you prefer it to look. I think I originally wrote the proposal as on the CL side it would be a union of the request types, but I just realized that it doesn't matter actually, and it's going to go over the engine API. So once it goes into the engine API, however, the CLs want to parse that out and put it into the payload, that's fine. It just feels like on the execution layer side, it makes more sense that we have a lot of operations that are of this form EL to CL messaging, and it seems cleaner on our end to package them into the same the same like overarching type. I don't know, Gajinder, if you also felt like that. You said you've been working on 6110 7002.
Yeah, so NC has worked from Lodestar on that, and yes, so I also sort of believe that it's a good mechanism in which basically we can have separate contracts doing separate queues, and EL basically then popping out whatever it wants and pushing all the EL operations into one single uh, execution field, payload field, and then basically CL applying those operations onto their state.
One thing I also realized, if we were gonna potentially change the maximum that are DQ'd per block, like if we leave that as a parameter that we could change in future hard forks, wouldn't we also want the target and maximum that enter the queue to be parameterized? Otherwise, you could dequeue a whole bunch, but like the 1559 mechanism is going to make it cost a lot.
What exactly is the question?
Like, we were basically discussing like how many get DQ'd per block, and that would best be a system parameter that we could tune in a future hard fork so that we could, and maybe the easiest way to do that is to either call the contract multiple times or pass that in as an argument with the system call to the contract. But the issue is that's the rate that we DQ. The rate that things get NQ'd is the 1559 fee mechanism, which we would almost certainly want to adjust in tandem with the rate that we DQ. If we up the number of operations that could be pulled from the queue, then we would probably want to up the number of operations that can go into the queue, right? So it's just that
I think the access mechanism would already basically take care of that. If you have an access mechanism going on, and then you DQ, and sort of that should affect whatever is the access passing on to the next blocks. That might sort of take care of that in that way.
Oh, sure. Okay. Yeah, I didn't realize that was how it was calculated. That makes sense.
Wait, sorry, I didn't follow that.
Well, the question
I think
is the fee calculated based on the excess amount in the queue?
It's the excess over the target. So I think that if you're not changing the target, then the fee is still going to ramp up very quickly.
And the target, though, is this target size of the queue, not the target operations per block?
It's the target per block, I believe.
I think so. There is from my reading of 7002, there was some the way we are tracking access. Maybe we can do something like that. We take the number of operations which we can pop in a block plus target, and then whatever is above that can be accessed, and that can affect the fee.
Yeah, basically, I mean, we can move this to a late, like we can discuss this later, but the idea is just that you couldn't, if we change the target, we'd want to change the fee correspondingly. If you want to double the number of operations going through this contract, you couldn't leave the target alone and just have the fee mechanism just limiting it. Anyway.
Yeah, that's something we need to talk about this more and figure out how to deal with this, because it's not 100% clear that in the future we could make an irregular state transition to actually update either the code or storage. So if there's a way to change the parameters the system calls the contract with to get the behavior that we want, we should look into that and come up with a good way of doing it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so we'll put that as a to-do. There's still people concerned about the slashing, risk analysis, things like that. And then Lion had requested, although he's not in the call, he had requested that we talk about his stricter bound for consolidation. Well, and I guess as we are getting closer to testnets, well, one thing we should discuss is just like a lot of people are pushing up the timeline for testnets right now. And yeah, I think we've got most of our questions answered. Thanks, like Lion. But a lot of people are pushing up the timeline for testnets right now. And so we kind of have a few outstanding EIPs as far as MaxEB, that if we're going to start implementing, we need to either get merged or decide whether they're in or out of the DevNet. So that may be something that's kind of urgent to discuss next. So one of them was this stricter bound for consolidation queue. But there's others. There's basically 4 outstanding pull requests right now to MaxEB. So, and also given that the basically the mechanism for how we're doing consolidations has yet to be decided, but then after it's even decided, we have to write up how to do it. You know, are we leaving consolidations out of the first DevNet? Is a question. So yeah, there's just questions around DevNet timing, and getting as much like what MaxEB is going to look like for the first DevNet. And it's likely that a lot of this especially over the next 2 days in preparation for the consensus call, it would be good to like bring that up as get everybody together and try to figure out what we're going to do, what the plan is for DevNet 0. So
in my opinion, I think we could do an iterative kind of a thing and basically leave consolidations out of DevNet 0. I don't basically see why we can't do that and sort of get everyone to start working on DevNet 0 specs.
yeah, that's certainly an option. But then there's these other outstanding pull requests, one of them being stricter bounds for consolidation. I don't know if anyone wants to give an opinion on that. There's a few more EIPs.
About the stricter bound things, I'm in favor of the general idea. I think probably we should just make it a parameter. What kind of the amount of epochs that we allow the queue to grow to. But instead of just this kind of fixed thing that Lion chose, but other than that, I think it makes sense. Although it might be just easier to set a smaller limit for the list, and not try to do this more clever thing. I think either solution would be fine.
Okay.
I do think the smaller list is a very simple way of implementing it. It just means that if we ever increase one value, we've got to increase the other, but that's fine.
I've got a PR out to as well about enforcing the rate limiting at the yeah, these are just the PRs under consideration. There's another one about enforcing the rate limiting at the transition, and then handle top-ups to existing validators is still out as well. Just pointing that out there. So as far as the stricter bound, I mean, I don't know. You said you're in favor of either way. I'm not fully caught up with this PR, but yeah, well, I guess my point here is perhaps we should work on trying to get these in by maybe Thursday, by the consensus call. And we can discuss that in the group if we want. Okay. Let's see. So it still sounds like people want to discuss on this meeting the activation rate limit.
What about just merging a minimal, basically the initial version of the activation thing that you had without the latest addition that you made? Like basically just purely requeuing without trying to kind of recover the
lost epochs.
Yeah, the lost epochs, and then we can like figure that out later. It just seems like the basic thing is definitely fine and like kind of a minimal necessary thing that needs to be there.
Sure. Yeah, I can change the PR to and move that to like another PR that we can choose to merge at some later point. Yeah, I can do that. So yeah, I'll do that, and then we can probably merge that quicker. Anything about in terms of these stricter bounds, or handling top-ups, anything that's preventing us from making a decision within the next 2 days and getting those merged? Or basically today and tomorrow, actually, I should say. Like we want it merged by the consensus call. Okay. We'll continue the discussion on merging this. I mean, it looks like 7251 has conflicts, or sorry, the top-ups PR has some conflicts to resolve. Stricter bounds looks okay, but we'll continue that. Okay. And then sounds like tentative decision is to maybe leave consolidations out of the first DevNet because well, yeah, that sounds like the decision for now. Correct me if I'm wrong. And then then a couple of people on the call earlier were saying that they'd like to discuss the slashing risks, slashing penalties.
Yeah, in the issue in the GitHub repository for call, there is a lot of mentioning the risk, and we actually did a pretty rigorous risk analysis building on the appliance one. And I can share the results so that people are better in context.
Sure.
Yeah, okay. 1 second, let me open the document and I'll share the screen. Okay. So basically, what are the premises for risk analysis is that most slashing happens when someone, like they happen by accident, when someone puts up two instances of the same infra for the same private key, and they do one of the slashable offenses. This can happen. Sorry, one. Yeah, okay. This usually can happen only when there is there is a slot that has a bit when two machines have a bit different view on the blockchain and can like usually decide the same attestations even if there are two machines. They're usually not doing slashable offenses, There has been a really good analysis by Ethereum Foundation DevOps guy that frequency of such slots in good weather is very low. It's like 1%, 4%, like once every 20 minutes. And in practice, it indeed does work like that. In a practical incident we had with Rock Logic, I think, they had basically 30 minutes from the deploying of misconfiguration until the first slashing came. Then, like, other premise is misconfiguration goes unnoticed until the slashing happens, and when it happens, there is a pretty fast response, like this under like 10 minutes and 20 minutes under 1 hour, but like it's not long until the operator goes and turns off the machine. And if we consider like all of this, means that if you have on the same infrastructure more than 100 validators, your loss goes like down with number of validators. If you have one validator on your machine, then you like in a slashing you get slashed for all of your validators. If you have two, you are likely to, like, the more validators you have on Ethra, the less share of slashed indexes you have until there is a floor. Then, sorry, it's not, so the more divergent slots, like slots where different views on epoch are for validators, the less risk increases with consolidations. And sorry, well, I'm changing the browser. Long story short, like if one has a lot of stake consolidations, you can consolidate until you have like more or less 100 validators on one machine, and it doesn't change the risk analysis. So like basically, if you have 500 validators in current of 32 ETH on your machine, then you can consolidate it to like 128 Ether, like 4 validators into one, and you will not have a significant change in how expensive the slashing will be for you. But if you don't have a lot of Ether, then consolidation raises your risk significantly. Like, for example, if you have like 256 Ethers of capital, and you consolidate all of them to a single validator, your first slashing is like the only slashing you have, and you'll get slashed for 8 Ethers straight away. If you don't consolidate, your first slashing is like slightly, or on average, slightly more than 20% of your validators get slashed, and then you turn everything off, and you're good. So like big pools like Lido, Coinbase, most Eigenlayer LRTs and stuff like that will be able to consolidate without changing the risk much. But if a solo staker with like not a lot of ether or a small operator consolidates, they are expected to increase their risk like pretty significantly. Paul, I think the current spec is that the slashing is not like is 1/32th of all your effective balance, not?
Not for 7251. We're reducing it
Okay.
we're reducing
Yeah.
the quotient. So it'll be 1.4096, which is tiny. I think for a 2048 ETH validator, it's going to work out to about half an ETH for the penalty.
Yeah. I thought the
For the
current
initial penalty
is like to keep the current slashing ratio 1/32.
No, I think it's a fair request that it gets reduced. I really do. The only thing we also had to adjust was the whistleblower reward, because otherwise we end up minting ETH. So they're going to both be basically equivalent, is the current plan. So that we're not producing ETH for these sorts of degenerate behaviors. But yeah, it should be very small.
Yeah. Okay.
So I think given that the quotient is going to be so low, that doing complicated things like curves is just going to make it a lot more difficult than it needs to be.
No,
But I'm open to
it
input
does
on
make
that.
sense. Yeah, just if the initial penalty is low, then there is like you don't need to change anything. Like,
Yeah,
my takeaway here is that like big pools can live with a not changed initial slashing penalty. It
yeah,
doesn't change risk significantly for them, but for smaller stakers, it does.
yeah, 100%. There's always going to be some level where there's an economy of scale. And fortunately, the smaller people usually ultimately wear that sometimes. But I think hopefully it's a good middle ground where we've landed at so far.
Yeah, it's a good
Definitely,
one.
you're 100% right about reducing your risk by increasing the number of validators. Smaller pools get the advantage probably, or individuals specifically, of not trying to run high availability, which reduces the risk a lot as well.
Yeah.
So, okay. Sounds like we've had some clarification there. In terms of, so one thing, do we feel like we are ready to make a decision on? I know I'm jumping around all over on subjects here, but before this call gets over, do we feel we're in a place where we can make a decision on how to initiate consolidations?
It sounds like there's a strong preference for EL. So as long as there's no problem with the EL implementing the messages, then that sounds like an easy option.
Yeah, in favor of EL triggered.
Yeah, EL triggered.
That's kind of, yeah, what I was thinking too. I know Mikhail was gonna look a little more into the contract, but yeah. Okay, so tentatively it looks like we're moving to EL triggered. Or at least that's what it looks like going forward. Okay. And then it sounds like also we are probably leaving consolidations out of the first DevNet. That was something else. And then we're trying to get those couple of PRs merged by Thursday so that the spec will be in a place where we can hopefully Thursday morning say like, all right, this is the DevNet 0 spec. Just there's no consolidations yet. Awesome. Okay. Is there anything else that was left behind or things? I mean, Should we have a call next week, same time? I see some votes for that.
I think it's a good idea, just in case there's anything that needs clarification afterwards, but it can be kept short if there's not much to discuss either.
Sure. Okay, and then maybe some things we might discuss is that parameterizing different things to those contracts, and also maybe more analysis on how many operations per block or things like that, things of that nature. But yeah, okay, so we will have another call. I'll set that up. Great. Francesco is asking if the slashing risk analysis that you just presented was public.
Yeah, it's linked in the GitHub issue.
For the call. Okay.
Yeah. Let me check that it's shared. Yeah, let's get to share.
Yeah, in terms of DevNet 0 as well, like I know we don't yet have like a unified spec for all of these EIPs. So I think that may be top of mind for the next call as well, but like I don't know, does anyone foresee any problems yet with how MaxEB jives with 7002 and the other EIPs, things that are likely to come up when we try to smash these together? Otherwise, we just cross that bridge when we get there. Main problem would be same page respect, true. Just a heads up on that HackMD that someone posted. I'm getting a 403 provision.
Yeah, we'll fix that.
Okay. Okay. Well, we'll have the another call next week. It sounds like we've made a decision at least on consolidations and and custom ceiling sounds like it's going to be another EIP. Potentially to be included in Electra, but a decision will be made later. Okay. Thanks everyone. There's nothing else. We'll end the call.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, everyone.
Yep.